Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2 of 613 Creatives. Today, I've got with me Kenneth Bowman. He is an audio guru. I've had the privilege of, he's very modest as well. I've had the privilege of working with him on short films of mine where he was able to make it sound absolutely beautiful. He is a jack of all trades. He's been working in videography and filmmaking since he was 16 years old. He's had his hands in all sorts of different productions and various things in Eastern Ontario. I'd like to welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Ken, my man. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, it's pretty good. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I'm pretty modest, I guess, but audio guru.
Yes.
I know. Here's the thing. You know how they say you should never compare yourself to other people? I consider myself good at audio, but because of the people I know, I don't consider myself good at audio. I consider myself a well-rounded student.
What's the saying that they say? Like, a truly professional person. They don't claim to know everything. You
can't. That's an impossibility.
Yeah. So I mean, that just makes you seem even more professional because you're just like, well, I'm always learning.
Well, I mean, I've had a chance to work with, a lot of people in a lot of different situations, right? Specifically for audio, I worked with Andrew Sutherland, who's a really good professional audio engineer, does film and stuff like that. And
has he done anything that people might have heard of?
I mean, he does a lot of fireside work. He's like union. So he's got a lot of experience. He's really good at his job. Like he's complimented me on my work and stuff like that. But I've obviously, while I was on set working with him, I picked his brain, right? Because, one thing I love to do is learn. And you know what I mean? There is a reality. You won't know everything, right? Like the true test of an audio person, and it doesn't matter whether you're in audio, whether you're in lighting, whether you're in camera department, it's your ability to troubleshoot on the fly without panicking, right? Like understanding the systems involved, knowing in the audio world, knowing your signal flow and knowing, okay, I'm not getting signal from here. What's going on? Like I've had that situation come up with lav mics before in the past. When I was using 4 or 5 lav mics, I've had many situations come up where I was in sheer panic on the inside, but on the outside to everybody watching, I was just doing my job. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's I think that goes to, you could use that for just about any profession, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Emergency response is and I say that using that word because when you're on set or something like that and something goes wrong, it is a bit of an emergency because time is money. But if your emergency response demeanor, it's a very important thing, because if people see you panicking, they're going to pick up on that. And if you're working as a team, other people are going to kind of get that feeling too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm, very cognizant of that, being a director. I mean, it's extremely important, obviously, to instill confidence in your crew, your cast and your crew, right? So, I mean, if you're, feeling a little uneasy and you've got to put out fires. Yeah, you can't. At the very least, you can't look like you're panicking.
No, and I mean, it's also knowing your equipment too, right? I haven't quite moved into the union level stuff yet. I'm working on it. I'm actually in school at a school here in Ottawa for audio engineering and recording. Because no, Terra. So Raven Street Studios, they have a course, basically the Audio Recording Academy. It's amazing. So because of my background in video and video production and film and multi-camera shooting and all of the stuff that I've done, I've always been more focused on the video end of things. Like I've done video streaming. I still do video streaming. I've done, I still do like avocational videos, so like weddings and, you know, parties and stuff, you know, getting into drone work. Multi-camera streaming. I've dabbled in, so like with my old YouTube channel, we used to do multi-camera streams a lot. I have a couple of episodes where we did like Zoom meetings with people in like Europe or whatever, because the majority of our fan base for that was Europe, because it was based on Warhammer, and a lot of people in Europe play a lot of Warhammer.
Really?
Yeah. You know, so, but we had to do streaming elements for that. So though, and because of my broadcasting education and background, it really lent itself well, because I understand it. Like I went out and I got like an Elgato Steam Deck because it works well with OBS. And then I set everything up with OBS, and then I, you know, did a live to drive switch, right? And I also streamed it at the same time. So there's a few other platforms out there that you can stream with, but I find OBS to be one of the most versatile. I think there's another program out there. I have yet to dabble with it. It's just OBS is one thing I know, and it's very straightforward. It's always plug-in based and it's clean, right?
Can you do the more complex stuff in OBS? Like, can you do the more involved stuff with the free version?
You can do, oh, it's all free.
That's all free.
OBS is all free. That's the beauty of it. So like, chances are if you want to do it, there's a tutorial out there on how to do it. And like, once you understand how the software works, because all OBS is switching software. That's all it is. Okay. It's like, okay, pull this source, switch to this source. Right. And then put it to this source. That's all it does. It does nothing else. Okay. The system is what does the encoding and stuff like that. It's got like lots of little things to help you out. But, you know, like if you want to do motion graphics, you can create your motion graphics in After Effects, as long as it's got a good alpha channel or a good, you know, green screen for chroma keying. You're pretty solid in confident. You can be confident in knowing that's going to work well. And I mean, you test it out before time and make sure that it works. Like, it can get kind of complicated with what you do. I've seen one of my favorite things to do, and I know we're getting off on a tangent here, especially with streaming, is to go out and see what other people do, because of my background with Anvil of War. And what I wanted to do with it, but never got to do with it. I always go out, and if there's a tournament around Ottawa, I will go to a tournament with my still camera, take a ton of pictures, and just enjoy it, because I love the art involved in miniature wargaming painting. As you can see by this guy here, right? I'm a painter myself, but the streaming setups now have gone from like a guy with a laptop and a couple of mics and a bunch of USB or webcams to like the last guy I saw had like 3 PTZ cameras. They had sorry, I'm going to say that they had 3 PTZ cameras, so pan tilt zoom, with a single controller, all set up to OBS, able to control all the camera angles. The players that were doing the game, they were both laved with like I think they were using the Sennheiser G4s. He had like a 16-channel audio board he was running to. It was a really, really nice setup. It's like something that I would like to show up to a tournament with and charge, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 for a weekend of streaming or live to drive, right? Just to capture the moment and then output it to YouTube, to Discord, or what's the other one? Twitch, right? More so with wargaming, people will view it live on Twitch, but then the most people will upload to YouTube after it's done. The beauty of that is because, like, when it comes to wargaming and streaming, your games are 3 hours long. Nobody's going to sit down and watch that unless they're into the game, you know? Yeah. So if you're studying the game, you'll watch the whole 3 hours, but you know, most of the time you're going to take it back to the post-production, and then you're going to cut it down to 45 minutes. Like, there's a really good channel I love to watch. And they do all kinds of games. It's called Play On Tabletop. And they do this like amazing, yeah, they do an awesome job. They do this amazing, like, you know, it's like a sports casted tabletop war game. And to be honest with you, if I ever had the chance to like dump $20,000 into something, that's what I would do with it, because, you know, to me, that's fun. right? I don't necessarily care if I'm the player. I just want to capture the moment and see what people do. I love the art of production.
Obviously, in my position, you have to have some familiarity and wear a lot of hats and have somewhat of a background in every area. I hear you going on about audio stuff and the best equipment for the best kinds of headphones, the best kinds of mics, and the best kinds of mixers, and et cetera, et cetera. It's all over my head personally. Like,
okay, so actually, it was put to me correctly the other day, and this is a very creative way of saying it. You can think that you have the best mic for a given situation, and you can be very wrong, or you can be very right. Like, not all mics are created equally, and not all mics are created for every situation. Okay. There are a few mics out there, as far as music goes. So my experience with sound is majority live and live to tape, or whatever you would call it. I have very little like in studio, like having a band coming in and recording in a studio. That has never been my forte. My forte was always in field. So when I was working with Little Chicago Studios, doing their live setups, how I started was I went in as a videographer. I'd go in and I'd set up all my equipment and I'd record it. And this was back in the day. I originally started out with Digi Hi 8. That was my first camera, and then I moved to Mini DV pretty quickly because, like, when I was going to school, Mini DV was like this new thing, and then they moved to HDV, which is the Mini DV tape, but it was HD, right? Still to magnetic tape. So like all my cameras were standard def Mini DV, right? And I had 4 matched cameras, so I had 4 Canon XL1Ss that I'd go in and I'd set up, and I'd man one. So I'd handheld one, and then I'd set up 2 more. Right. And majority of my experience there with Little Chicago Studios was as a video guy. I was their video guy. If they had anybody that came in and was like, "Oh, I need a video," I was on call. So like I went and I did with them a lot of live venue shoots. I have pictures of me in my 20s where I go back and I'm like, man, I remember that show. I was working on a documentary at one time, and this person shipped me around to like all these different places. I had to go meet with like media lawyers and stuff like that. It was a beautiful, crazy experience. I absolutely loved it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was so long ago. But the cool part about it is, through doing that and through being the video guy for a live studio, because I was really good friends with Tim and Mark, the guys who ran Little Chicago Studios, they always needed that third person to kind of help with setup. So a lot of the time I'd go in and I'd get my video stuff set up fairly quickly because it was something I knew really well. And then like you take like 10 years of like having to go in and set up a live stage once a month or twice a month, right? Right. And then you put that on top of what you already know, right? And so I picked up on things, and that's really how I learned audio. Okay. I also have a really good ear because I always listen to music. Music has always been a big passion of mine ever since I was a kid. The reason why I got into film and television, and the reason why I got into broadcasting, was I was a Much Music kid. I lived off of that television station. I wanted to be the camera operator in the studio, just waving around and getting all those crazy shots. That was my dream. And by the time I graduated college, they'd literally been on the verge of closing it down, which, was okay. But Ottawa and Smiths Falls and the area I was working in, they had all these live bands, right? All this live stuff going on, right? So, it was kind of natural that I kind of migrated towards that, because music is also a very big passion of mine. I don't play much of anything. I think I play the harmonica. I'm learning the guitar. I know like 3 or 4 notes on the guitar. I have a left-handed guitar here. Cool. So because of my love for music, I can remember being a kid and sitting down and playing records on my parents' stereo when I was a kid. And, like I did it every Sunday. Music has been a part of my life from the get-go. And being able to combine 2 things I love, like my love for videography and now still photography and cinematography, and then combining that with live music was like a godsend in the way. Right. And then I did that for like 10 years, right? So like I picked up on things. So I was always helping them set up stuff and tear down stuff and asking Tim questions. Like this board right here actually has won Tim several awards for like several Juno awards for blues, because this board has like 16 direct outputs on it. And at one point in time, it was set up to a system in which it could direct output every single channel to a separate track on a drive recorder. You know what I mean? Like he had a live to drive setup that was like for going to a venue and setting up. So he could record up to 16 tracks on this setup. It's just a rack mount setup. Tim would go in and he'd create a mix, right? And then this board has a really nice ability to record what's on the board directly to a hard drive, so that he could take it back into his edit suite later, his DAW, and mess around with it and actually master the track. So like a lot of the stuff that when I did blues on the Rito, a lot of the stuff was like Tim would take this board, multi-track it on the night, on the day, and then he'd take it back to his DAW in his studio, and then he'd really quickly do a mix for it and then send me the mix.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I always had like studio level audio, even though it was a live event. Right. Like, so that's always fascinated me.
So cool.
I've never had the experience to actually be the mixer. I've done it a few times. I've had artists come up to me and be like, "Hey, do you know how to record this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got a basic idea." So I've always tried it out in like audition or whatever, but it's always been like either live off the floor, which means like the band is all recording and then I have them mic'd up separately, just using what I know of miking techniques and stuff like that, what I learned from doing live stuff. Right. And what I think sounds good, and I've had compliments like, "Oh my God, you got such a clean sound, but you don't know how to mix." And I'm like, yeah. So like I'm going to school to learn how to mix and do all the studio level stuff. I know I'm going off on a tangent. My ADHD is showing.
It's all good, man. I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, we want to hear the stories, right? We want to hear the stories of all the creative people. Oh,
I've spent more time. So this is why I don't consider myself an audio guru. I've spent more time in my professional career as a videographer and editor, and stuff like that. And it's only been because I don't know anybody else that does it for video and film, or didn't at the time, that I've had to be like, okay, this is how I know to get good audio. So I've just kind of figured it out. And then when I've had a question, I've asked the people that I know that know about audio, who have explained it to me very well. Right. So, that's why I say that I don't know everything, because I'm always learning with this. Like there are techniques that I don't know that I know I'm going to learn from working with other people who are engineers, right? I have no problem in admitting the fact that, I don't know everything, but I know more than most people would know about it, but course, I also know an insane amount about studio setups as far as video production goes. I know an insane amount about, shooting, because I spent 16 to probably about 36 as a videographer. Yeah. Right. Like, and I still have my last camera sitting on my shelf, right? Other than my still camera. And I'm just kind of getting back into it. Like, I think the last big production I did was in 2019 before COVID. And I got the chance to shoot a documentary about, it's called Sea Dogs, The Grind. It's a Sea Dog story. About that. Yeah. So that was a beautiful experience. Yeah. This is a long story, and I'll kind of sum it up. Okay. I started my own video production company. I ran it to about 2013. And in 2013, I was just getting kind of burnt out. So I decided to close it down. I stopped. I sold off all of my gear, which was a big mistake. It's always a big mistake. Never sell your gear. Never, ever sell your gear. Have a garage just full of it, because you never know when you're going to need it.
Hear that, everybody? Keep your gear.
I always kick myself, because like I had like a full set of Arri lights. I closed my company down in 2013 because, my kids were growing older. They needed me a little bit more. And I was a single parent at the time. I was having trouble just lifing, because I had a full-time job. I was a single parent, and I was also doing the video production thing. So I burnt myself out a little bit.
I think a lot of people listening probably can identify with that for sure.
Yeah. So I closed it down, and then I was like, okay, my my thing is I'm not happy unless I feel productive or I'm doing something, so I decided to, eventually I got into airsoft, and then that led me to a paintball field. Actually, it was a birthday party that led me to a paintball field, and then the paintball field, the owner was like, "Oh wow, you're really passionate about paintball." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've always been passionate about paintball because like I played it as a kid. I absolutely loved it. Like I was just a huge paintball nerd."
I can vouch for that, everyone. He is a paintball nerd.
So
he's had many stories.
The thing is, eventually over time, that led me to literally running a team of 3 camps. Like I was managing a team of 3 camps. I was the guy that set up the paintball fields for tournaments and stuff like that. Right. I literally built fields for tournaments in Smiths Falls with a group of people. I didn't do it solely on my own, but I was the one that maintained them because I just loved the sport so much. Right. So I was presented with the opportunity to go shoot a documentary for a semi-pro team from Canada that goes down to the States and plays. And I mean, these players are pretty elite players. Like, these are some of the guys that I would look up to when I was playing, right? These guys are solid. They know what to do in any given situation because it's a real quick sport. If you ever get a chance to watch like the NXL broadcasts or anything like that, you'll understand what I mean. It might not make sense to you, but like once it makes sense, it makes sense. Like these guys are going through pure adrenaline. So when I got the opportunity to shoot a documentary following this team in 2018, I took it. It was well paid. Everything was paid for. I did 2 of the 5 episodes because the money ran out. That's the sad part about it. I never got to finish it, but the 3 episodes that I did do, I did my best.
Did they finish it? Like, did anything?
Oh, they. So that season they got to the finals. So they made it to Sunday Fun Day, which is like in the paintball world is like the day you want to make it to, because the tournament starts on Thursday, which is a practice day. Then it's Friday, Saturday. And then if you make it past Friday and Saturday on your games, you hit Sunday, and Sunday Fun Day, like the day to play, on their last tournament, they just lost their shit. They failed. You know what I mean? They were playing against some pretty elite teams. Everyone was playing for everything because, like, at their level, they're playing for a pro spot. They're not playing for glory or a small time prize. They're playing for a professional level spot in the entire league. Right. So, like, they'd be up there with like Edmonton Impact or whatever. I know most people, they don't care about these teams, but to me, Edmonton Impact is one of the best teams in the world. So is Russian Legion. So is, there's LA Infamous. If you ever get a chance to look up these people, you'll understand what I mean. So like they were playing for that. They were playing for like the Formula One of paintball. Okay. Right. In a professional sense. Right. So they were playing their hardest, their best. So when I was recording them, that's what they were doing. In the semi-pro level, they were making mistakes. They were taking big moves. They were doing all this. So for me, it was amazing. And I was the one solely running around, getting interviews, capturing all of these games and stuff like that. It was an insane amount of work. Yeah, but I didn't care. I loved it. It was like being on a film set. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're on a film set, you just don't care that you're there for 12 hours. You're happy you're there. You're in the moment. Absolutely. So
when I was, let me interject here. One of my shorts, a zombie film, dead serious. For one of the days that I was shooting, I was on my feet. I was directing and shooting it myself. I wasn't delegating to other people to shoot it at that time. I was on my feet.
That's a lot of work.
Yes. Directing and shooting. I've since learned my lesson, as we discussed earlier. Everything's got, you constantly evolve the more you do this stuff, right? But I was on my feet for so long, and I don't really know how long, probably like 18 hours, something like that or whatever. But I was on my feet constantly for so long that I had blood under my toenails.
Yeah. Okay. I've never been there, but
I mean, it's not, I'm not comparing, it's not a competition, but I know exactly what you mean. Like, despite the fact that some people might look at it like, oh my God, you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You're
in heaven.
You're if you're passionate about it, and you love it. Like, I came from a career in IT, and which is, an extremely, as you can well imagine, extremely stressful sector. This is what I have, filmmaking and storytelling is what I have a passion for. Like, I didn't have a passion for computers. Like, did I?
Computer is a tool.
What's that?
Computer is a tool. A computer is a tool. It's a tool to get the job done.
Yeah. There is some people though. I mean, depending on what they're passionate about, I mean, they may love that. They may love, people that's their, not only is it their bread and butter. And for me,
I have a friend of mine who loves computers so much, he just started his own business out of his house. And because he ticked off other businesses in the area, they basically forced him to open up his own store. And you know what the funny part is? He ran them all out of business. He was passionate about computers. So I get it.
Yeah. See, that's the thing, right? Like, I have my own business for a long time too. Like, I worked in computers and I worked for corporations, big and small. I worked for Geek Squad for a time, in the store and in the car. I had the badge and the BlackBerry and the suit and everything.
Oh my God.
And the car, the Beetle and everything. Anyway, yes, I was a geek in Geek Squad. But the point is that I didn't have a passion for it. It was paying the bills. And, but there was always that fire in my belly that, said you got to be a storyteller. And I kept up with it as a thing on the side. The old adage, right? Like, if you're doing what you love, you're never working a day in your life. I mean,
absolutely.
That like what you're saying there is like, it's a prime example of that, right? Like, and to anybody out there who can see what we're saying here, like, if you have that passion, if you have that fire in your belly that's telling you got to be a storyteller, you got to be a filmmaker, if it's really what you're passionate about, it's really what you get excited about, then do it. I mean, there are risks involved, and it may not be the most lucrative thing right from the get-go, but you can know the right people and you're persistent, it can be. And
nothing worth
that's
doing.
What I'm discovering as well. Nothing
worth doing in life is without risk, right?
Absolutely.
So it's taken me. So my story is one where because I have anxiety, I'm just kind of opening myself up here. I have anxiety, right? So
I'm right with you there, man.
I was always afraid to take risks. So like I've always had clients be like, so do you do this full time? Like, this is when I was doing my video production stuff. Cause like, you can see my passion, like on the camera, like as we're talking, right? Like if I have a camera in my hand, I'm happy. Right. Yeah. If I have a mic in my hand and getting good sound, I'm happy. Yeah. If I'm doing still photography, I'm happy. Even if I'm pissed off because I'm not getting what I want, I'm still fucking happy. I'm doing what I love. I'm being creative, like when I make, so I do model shoots and when I make like a little blurb, I always do like a treatment, like a story of what I want to shoot, and I kind of plan out my shots that way.
Even
because
with the still photography, you do make it like a story.
Absolutely. Okay. So I have the one shoot that I did, the Elvin Queen shoot. We went out and as Sarah and I were like combining these things, I was kind of developing the idea. I didn't really say much to her about it, but it was like I had this whole storyline in my head of like her, discovering a portal and stepping through the portal and just kind of going through that. And you kind of see it in the images that I did. So like I always have thought I'm a very visual thinker. I'm a 3D spatial visual thinker. It's if you were to kind of classify me. Okay. So I think very visually, and if I generally can envision it, it will come to pass. I will make it happen. Which is funny that I got into audio because I think so like when I was in college, so I didn't take film school, but I got a broadcasting education. So my education was more, it was a good combination. It wasn't as dedicated to film and single camera production as yours was. And it was less theory. It was more the technical side of things. Like, okay, you've got 3 cameras. This is how you set them up. You know what I mean? And then we did like newscasts. Like I remember being in a newsroom while the planes hit the Twin Towers, you know what I mean? And my teacher ran in. Really? She's like, "Oh my God." No. And she didn't say, "Oh my God, somebody ran a plane into the Twin Towers." She goes, "Oh my God, imagine what's going on in the newsroom right now." Yeah. And then she showed us the plane hitting the towers. So that's when I was going to school. Wow. And like, it was just like a holy shit moment,
Absolutely.
And so like, that's my education. My education is big studios and multiple cameras and large switchers. And the industry is completely and totally changed from when I was going to school. So I'm no longer technically qualified to work in broadcast. Everything's automated now. So,
God, dude. Like, I mean, it's a completely different beast from when I went. Like when I went, it was 1995, 1996. Like nothing was digital. The only thing that was on tape potentially was the audio.
Tape.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys ran multi-track recorders and stuff like that, right?
Our projects would be divided up into, like, we worked in 16 millimeter film. So we started in black and white, and then you had to do a color project. And then we had to do a color project with sound, and that was done with 16 millimeter magnetic film stock.
Yeah, because it basically has the magnetic strip alongside the picture. That's pretty cool.
After it's processed, yes. Yeah.
Did you know? All right, I have old school, like 1970s Super 8 millimeter film stock. I have some. Nice. It was a project. I was trying to convert it for somebody, but I wasn't able to convert it. And that person has since, kind of, never asked for it back. So it's sitting there waiting for them to ask me for it. And the audio tracks on it are actually optical.
Oh, okay.
It's an optical audio track. It's literally a visual representation of the waveform. It's so cool. So I don't know how that would have transpired. Don't know what kind of transponder they would have used to kind of like take that visual energy and convert it back into like a kinetic energy for a speaker or whatever. But I always thought that was cool. Like that they used like a visual. It was an optical thing. It wasn't magnetic.
There must be like some kind of optical sensor or something in the projector, or
maybe
or something like that. Like, I don't know.
When I went to school, so I specialized in video editing. I was always the editor. I was always the guy at the console or whatever. I was fascinated by NLEs, so Avid. Like, we had this giant honkin' Avid, this old school Mac that was like, this costs $100,000. And like, okay, what costs $100,000 on it? The Mac was a piece of junk, right? But all of the work was done in the rack mount cards that were right beside it and allowed you for machine control and everything. So it was still
like, were you like digital from the get go? Like you had like,
no,
you were like a Doug Shuttle machine?
So my first edit suite that I ever got to work on for video was tape to tape. So it was AB roll cut suite. And it was all SVHS. So you have a deck here, two monitors, and then you have a control. Yeah. You have a control surface. Yeah. So it was all time code based. And then you had to like generate, you had to plug into the time code generator that was in the studio and yada, yada, yada. And then, so like I learned that on Kojiko's stuff. And then I moved forward to school, edited on that for my first year, did really well with it. And then we moved to NLE in my second year. So that was like when I was introduced to Avid for the first time, Avid Media Composer. And I spent so many years working with Avid. I absolutely love it. And it was like a aha moment, because like then I could work nonlinear. I could build my intro, and then because like tape to tape, you're very linear. You have to go from beginning to end, and to do an insert edit. It was really, really hard. You had to know the time code, or if you knew you screwed up somewhere, you'd have to go back. You'd have to do a match frame, and match frames were ridiculously hard back then. Now with everything digital, it's super easy. And the beautiful thing about it is all NLEs are built the same. So Premiere was garbage when I was in school. I never used it. I used Avid and for years and years and years. And it wasn't until Adobe Premiere was like, hey, Avid's doing this right. Maybe we should copy what they're doing, So then they started copying it. And that's when people really started to like the software, right? Everybody at that time was using Final Cut Pro, which I hated. So like I've spent more time in my professional life as a video editor and video producer than I have as an audio guy. So audio was just one of those things that I got into because I didn't know anybody else that wanted to do it, or nobody else wanted to do it. And because of my background and what I know about music and stuff like that, I always took that. I'm like, you know what? Nobody wants to do this. Fuck it. I'll do it. Right. So like in college, when we had to shoot our films in our third year, when it came time, it was like, who wants to do audio? Here we have this little field mixer. They were like a Sound Devices 2-channel field mixer with like you could plug in a mic You can plug in a boom mic. We only ever have a boom mic, so we use like an OG boom mic, and I can't even remember what it was. Probably an ME66 or something like that. Just like this old Sennheiser mic. So I had to learn how to boom on the fly. That was my first time ever being a boom op and mixer at the same time. So my entire third year I spent behind a microphone and then behind an edit suite. Oh, wow. So those have been always my two favorite positions to do as far as film stuff goes. Yeah. And a lot of what I'm doing now and learning now in school is so that I can get into the mastering stages of audio. I've mastered a few things. Like I did 2 documentaries. If you look my IMDb up, I have a few sound things up there. I have 2 documentaries that I reworked the sound on. I mastered the sound for, and then I did a web series which they gave me. It was horrible audio. It was done by a whole bunch of people, so I did my best to kind of fix that up. You know, and I'm still trying to take on projects like that. You know, too, because I like learning. I like the mixing aspect. I like being able to like sculpt that. You know what I mean? Because like as a video editor, you know, anybody can, I hate to say it, there's so many people who can edit a video out there.
Yeah.
The competition is like insane, but you know, there's not as many people focusing on the audio aspect, and there's so much stuff I see where I'm like, wow, like, okay, they could have done this better, or they could have done this better, because I have a really good trained ear.
You know, it's the difference between those who are going to, you know, consider it a hobby and those who consider it, you know, what they want to, you know, they want to make it their bread and butter, right? And
absolutely,
it astounds me how many parallels there are to our stories. Like for me, for instance, I mean, you know, like if I ultimately had to have the choice, I mean, I would want to direct. You know, I was very much, I've always very much been focused on trying to create the strongest bridge in communication between director and actor and getting the, you know, optimal performance. But aside from that, like you say, you know, you have passion for this avenue, but then there's also the audio. For me, it's editing. You and I have had similar journeys in terms of editing as well. Like, you know, back in the day, I was the editor-in-chief of my high school's video news magazine. And, you know, it was all SVHS, you know.
Oh, wow.
You know, dual.
Did you use a video toaster? Please tell me you used a video toaster.
Later on, we used video toaster.
When my God.
Even before video toaster.
Oh, yeah. That brings back you have no idea how happy that makes me. The OG, like Amiga setup with video toasters. Oh, my God.
Indeed an Amiga. Yes, we had that. That's what we used. That's what we used our visual effects for like the titling and stuff like that. But I had back when I first started getting going, it looked like a plastic typewriter titling machine for doing our titles and credits and
I remember those. Yeah, we had one of those too.
It was just, you know, with little rubber buttons on it, and I loved it. Like, you know, you just had the little shuttle machine, and you know, the first time I ever had I inserted an audio track over top of a video track that didn't belong. You know, necessarily, I was like, oh my God, you can do that. And, thus, you know, the film nerd in me was born. And, you know, so, I mean, whether it was that or in film school, working on a flatbed with, you know, 16 millimeter film, with
doing the actual splicing with a razor blade.
Yeah, I still have the tape from my splicer, the film tape, which is like crystal clear film tape from my splicer. And yeah, working on the flatbed, or, you know, eventually, I mean, you know, I've gone through so many, like I work in Adobe Premiere now, but I mean, I went through so many different types of software between analog and digital. Like I use Corel Video Studio Pro, and I hate to, you know, disparage any one particular brand.
Do you remember Pinnacle? You ever use Pinnacle?
If you look at if you check out my YouTube page, there is a Star Wars fan film that I did there where I'd used I did rotoscoping and stuff like that for lightsabers. I used Adobe Photoshop for the rotoscoping, just, you know, drawing in the lightsabers frame by frame.
Oh, so you copied all the frames, exported them, and then did that? Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then add the color after the fact to everything. But the edit was done in Pinnacle. And yeah, I did a documentary on the Blue Ghost Tunnel in Niagara. That was done in Corel Video Studio Pro, which for some reason I couldn't for the life of me figure out why, but anything I did in Corel Video Studio for some reason came out very choppy. It's very, no matter how as close together or far apart my edits were, my cuts, it came out for the end result always rendered very choppy. And I don't know if it was the computer I was using, but anyway, I like Corel for other things, but maybe not for video production. And eventually I found my way to Premiere. Everyone's like, everyone's using Premiere, I know nowadays, like you and I, we orbit similar filmmaking circles of people. And I know a lot of them are like, oh, you got to go to Pinnacle. You got to go to DaVinci Resolve. It's so much for color grading. And I'm sure there's some merit to that. But I'm the type of person that is like, once I learn one particular type of software, it's very difficult to transition.
My qualms with DaVinci, and this is the reason why I don't like to use it. Mm-hmm. So I grew up editing either like when I was 16, I was running the truck, right? The mobile edit suite, mobile cut suite, switching from camera to camera live. Okay. And then I moved, when I was editing, it was like AB cut suite, right? So deck controller in the middle, plus your titling machine. And then, then I moved from that to Avid, which ruined me, right? Because then I was like, oh my God, I was editing documentaries on this thing in college, right? Almost weekly. And that, I learned that piece of software so fast and so well that people were coming to me for study notes because they're like, oh, how do I do this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I just do this. Yeah. Because I learned the keyboard shortcuts. I was at the point where I barely had to use a mouse. Everything I did was on the keyboard because Avid was designed that way. Well, it was built as a visual. So it's like Pro Tools, like in the audio world. Pro Tools looks and works like a tape machine. Okay. Right? Avid looks and works like an old school, like A/B cut suite. And it always has and always will. That's the beauty of it. Now that I'm simplifying it, but there's more to it than that. Yeah. So all of those systems were built to integrate older professionals into the newer world. So they were designed so that people could understand them. Yeah. Then when Final Cut Pro came out, it was like, oh, there's this new shiny thing. It works kind of like Avid, but it's very heavily like, it's Mac only, copied a lot of things from Avid. It had a lot more power and a lot more plugins at the time than Avid did. Mm-hmm. So everybody switched to it because it was like good for effects and stuff like that. Yeah. But I was used to, at the time, rendering things out in Adobe After Effects, right, to get them integrated. Like I learned Lightwave on the Amiga, so I would do my 3D titling in Lightwave, and then I would integrate that into After Effects, the output. Right. And then in After Effects, I would kind of integrate all the other graphics. And then in After Effects, I would export that as a frame, a series of frames. And then I would import that into Avid because Avid just automatically went, okay, this is a series of frames. Okay, cool. It's a video. Right. So it just frickin' worked. So I always spent my life as a video editor in Avid. I rejected all other software platforms because of I didn't like the way Final Cut Pro worked, which kind of hurt me as a professional because everybody here in Ottawa at the time didn't use Avid. They used Final Cut because Final Cut was the cheaper option. It was $1,000 at the time. Avid was like $2 to $4, depending on what version you were using. Plus Avid was very hardware based. Final Cut Pro was software based. You needed a Mac and that's it. Right. But what Avid had was deck control. It had, dedicated file formats. So like every time you brought stuff into Avid, it converted it into an OMFI media file. Right. And it just worked. Right. At the time, I wasn't using Adobe because Adobe has always had this problem where, and it works better now. Right. This is why I use Adobe because it's cheaper and it's more accessible. When Adobe took the decision to like make it work like every other editing software out there, like Final Cut Pro did at the time, like like Avid did. They basically copied the Avid style timeline, in my opinion. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is just my personal opinion. When they finally did that, and they're like, okay, because the problem with Adobe is when in the olden days, if you weren't using hardware with Adobe, it was garbage. It always crashed. And a lot of the reason why it crashed is because if you worked with Adobe, you could import a QuickTime, you could import an AVI, you could work with different codecs on the same timeline. But the problem with doing that is you end up running into the problem where as it's trying to play the video, it's having to load a codec, and then it dumps that codec, picks up the next codec, which is where you would get glitching in the video, and that's when it would crash. When I got into the habit early on as a video editor working in digital to always convert my media first. So I'd bring my media in once I digitized it with the DV, from DV to digital. I would always convert it to a specific format that I always worked in. Nowadays it's H.264 or H.265, but before it was like AVI, MPEG-4 codecs and stuff like that, and then so on and so forth down the road. So I always convert my media before I edit, because then I know that I'm always working in the same codec. I'm always doing this. And now you've got video cards. Like I have a laptop beside me that's basically, it's got hardware integrated decoding and encoding. So I always convert my video into a format using a codec that is always going to be processed by my video card. That way I'm always using the hardware in my computer. Macs didn't have that for a very long time. They had, and what made Final Cut Pro a really good alternative was, especially for like prosumer stuff, was the fact that Macs integrated QuickTime encoding and decoding into the software. You know what I mean? So it basically would send a video file off to a QuickTime chip that would decode and encode the video, and then it would come back.
Yeah. If I can jump in on that and speak to that one, I worked on a project not too long ago for Blue Ice Pictures. It was a producer who was looking to create a commemorative video for his son's baseball tournament, Little League tournament in Canada. And I had three cameramen, including myself. I was using a Canon 70D, but he wanted everything in 4K. So basically my plan was I had two other cameramen. They were both using Panasonic GH5s. But what I didn't realize is that they were both using different file formats. One was recording in MP4 and one was recording in MOV, using different codecs.
Yeah.
And not only that, but slightly different resolutions. Not too bad. Like I could compensate for that without much problem. So my plan was I would get the B-roll and I could digitally upscale it later. For anybody who's looking for a good digital upscaler, I would recommend Topaz. I believe it's called Topaz AI. I'll tell you here in 2 seconds. And I've had some. It's not the perfect.
I've heard of that. It's a good solution though.
Yeah, Topaz.
You're probably going to hear a beep because there's a microwave going off in the background.
Oh yeah, no worries. There's a dog going off in my background.
So it's funny because you learn those practices and they always stick with you, right? Like I still to this day always pre-convert my video files into the same format. Yes. And it's down to if there was I was on a film set and they had a mini DV cassette tape camcorder on there and they were recording B-roll with it, and they're like, oh yeah, I know, it's great, it's yada yada yada, and my instinct was to be like, hey, make sure you pre-tension that tape before you start recording on it. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, pre-tension the tape. They're like, how do you do that? I'm like, okay, well, coming from a broadcasting background, to me, it's like, okay, well, you pre-tension the tape so you make sure you don't get any signal loss, because in digital, it's either there or it's not. Right. And with DV, it was very notorious for doing that. So like those things become ingrained in you, those practices, you know? So sorry, continue. I do apologize for interrupting. I just had to.
No worries. No, I was just saying, like, you know, that was a lesson that I learned as well, because I put everything together, realized that the render, it basically would stall at 20 minutes and just wouldn't do anything at all. Like you could even bring up, you know, Task Manager on the computer and it would say the Adobe Premiere's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. And I realized it was because it was, and it seemed to me like such a dumb thing. Like it was because I was working with two different file formats, two different codecs. I don't know if I don't think the resolution had anything to do with it, but
PCs do not like MOV files.
Don't like what? Sorry?
MOV files. They don't like QuickTime files.
So here's what my solution was, right? Since you had like the standard kind of MP4 format mixed in with the the uncompressed MOV format, what I had to do to complete my edit is I had to render it not as an MP4 but as a raw uncompressed MOV, and only then would it actually complete. And then from there, I had to edit with everything already baked in. I had to do everything else, all my extra additional tweaking and color correction and so forth after the fact in this one file where everything was already, the audio and everything was already baked in. Obviously, there's some drawbacks to doing that, but yeah, I just wanted to say that I learned a very similar lesson that if you're editing, make sure that you have standard codecs and file formats and resolutions across the board. If you're working with a multi-camera setup, here's another tip I'll give people. If at all possible, make sure that the time is synced. You don't necessarily have to use time code. I didn't necessarily have to use it, but it helps a great deal if you're with different camera people, that your time is synced on all your different cameras.
Yeah, if you're recording audio on those cameras and you don't have synced time code, because I've never had to deal with time code outside of a broadcasting environment, right? Even in film, I use time code, like I use little tentacles and stuff like that. But like when I was doing my own stuff, I just didn't care, because one of the things that I learned early on as a video editor, and this goes back into my audio experience, is I learned how to look at a waveform and sync my cameras just using a waveform frame by frame.
So you're doing it visually, manually.
Yeah, visually, manually.
Wow.
That's a skill set that I learned very early on. So if I was recording with like 4 cameras, I'd make sure I'd clap or I'd make a sound, and if I didn't have that in the video, I would be like, okay, I'll pick a moment where I know what the waveform looks like, and then I'll just slide the other one back and forth on my timeline until I see the same thing. And if I hear any kind of echo, it's out of sync, and then I just mess with it frame by frame. It doesn't take that long once you learn how to do it, and it's a very important skill to learn.
And
like I've had people.
That's probably a lot of the time that's what you had. You had no choice. I mean, there was no synchronization feature.
Very early on. Yeah, no, and nowadays you have an auto sync button, but like, I mean, I'm talking like I've worked with nonlinear edit suites from 2003 to 2024. Right? Like I've been able to grow and see all that stuff. Like nowadays I'm like, I'm recording somebody in the middle of a hall with a whole bunch of people talking. I can just go into Premiere and just AI enhance the audio and get someone somewhat clean sound. Yeah, the AI isn't perfect and sounds kind of garbled, but at the same time, you know what I mean? It's usable voice from a party, and people understand that, okay, these people are at a party, but it's just enough to bring that voice over what's going on in the background. So it's amazing what you can do with your NLEs now, as for even just from an audio standpoint.
Absolutely. This will make you laugh, actually.
Sure.
I'll fill you in. When I was back in film school, one of the assignments that we had was to do Foley with this
nice
big ass tape deck type thing. It was magnetic tape that was about, I don't know, a few centimeters, like a couple centimeters wide. It was like the spaghetti type stuff on the dual reel, reel to reel type thing or whatever. And our assignment was to go around with that thing with this big ass mic from the 1970s. I don't know what kind of mic it was, but yeah, like I went around campus and I recorded footsteps going upstairs and somebody closing and opening and putting something in their microwave in my dorm room, doors closing and shutting, like the most mundane things on this spaghetti tape reel to reel setup.
Oh God, nice.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, to think back now that's that's what had to be done for Foley to what can be done now. How much things have evolved.
Just making sure the hair is good.
Making sure the hair is good.
If you are a film guru, I am not a film guru. I would consider myself more of a video guru than I am an audio guru, because when it comes to video, I'm pretty confident in my abilities. When it comes to audio, I realize that I'm still learning a lot. I'm confident in my abilities, but there's always something to learn. I mean, I don't know everything with video. There's some insane stuff that I've learned from the professionals in the area that I'm just like, they completely continue to blow my mind and stuff like that. But
you have you have a passion for audio regardless.
I do have a passion for audio. And one thing I really like doing, and here's the reason why I decided to go back to school and learn the audio recording end of things. So because of my experience with Little Chicago Studios, it was a larger studio when I first started working for them. And in fact, out of college, here's the romantic part for me. It was the first video that I ever got paid to produce outside of school. So I'd literally just graduated from Loyalist College in 2003, and I was hired because I knew the guys that owned the studio. They're like, "Oh, video, you know how to do all this." So I was hired to produce their web video for their studio tour. And it was this groovy little, I can remember editing it. It was just a bunch of Tim talking and shots of the studio. It was like going to be pretty standard. And I'm like, how do I make this intro pop? Right. So he sent me some music of some test stuff that he's working on. I found this groovy little high fast like guitar riff, nice. Right, and then it goes into a cymbal smash, right? So with Adobe After Effects and stuff like that, I made this title where the right, the Little Chicago Studios goes with the cymbal crash, right? But what the kicker was, I had no idea how to make this intro work. And then I started scrubbing through the video in Avid while I was working on it. And it was like all this really, really quick cuts, like all these quick shots of the studio. Was like, because it was just like a tape that I'd recorded with all of my cover shots. Right. So what I did was I was like, I wonder how that'd look if I sped it up by like 3,000 times. And it was this groovy little sequence of just me walking through the studio of like shots of guitar, shots of drums, shots of piano, shots of like everything, just really, really fast, moving all over the place. Yeah. And with the music, it was like, because it was like this riff of like, right? And then it went into the music. Right. It fit. And I'm like, oh my God. Right. So that's like, because music for me has been something that I use to emote. It helps me process things. Like, so I if I'm sad, I'll listen to certain songs. If I'm happy, I'll be like, I'll listen to stuff that makes me feel happy. Right. I'll use it to uplift my mood. I'll use it to bring down my mood. It helps me regulate. And it definitely influences my situation in life. As a video editor, I've always used music to evoke emotion, which is what it's there for, right? Like if you look back at the older films, you didn't have a lot of music and they were kind of flat. It was just a bunch of dialogue, right? But they use like certain sounds to kind of evoke what they wanted you to feel, right? And then in the 70s, 60s and 70s, they started using the cymbals, not the cymbals, the violin or the viola, that really high squeaking, like to kind of build up the tension, right? So I've always paid attention to that as a video editor, and it just kind of led me naturally into like, okay, well, how can I use music to like present, how awesome this situation is, or how soothing this situation is. So like I've always worked that into my video stuff. So it's always fascinated me that, you can do that. And one of my dreams for a long time has been to be able to like, which I've fulfilled, but I still love doing it, was to be able to like master something. And with just a laptop and a pair of headphones, I was able to like work on documentaries and stuff like that and help creatives out. So I have a few credits there, and I've just kind of been going with it ever since, and then the live, field recording stuff came around because somebody I knew needed a sound guy. And I'm like, well, I have the sound equipment. You need to get it. Right. Excuse me. Yeah. Well, I have the sound equipment. You need to get what you need. so it just kind of evolved from there. I got one gig, did that gig, and then I did another gig, and then I did another gig and another gig. I'm like, wow, I'm really good at this. And I mean, like, it's to the point where, like, I was so nervous the first full feature length film I ever worked on. I was so nervous. I actually kind of like stopped paying attention to what I was doing because I was so nervous, and actually accidentally bopped the DLP in the head twice with my boom mic. He was so mad at me. I'm super glad I didn't get fired, but at the same point in time, he handled it really well. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. He's like, okay, back your microphone off a little bit. He's like, we'll get coverage when, you can get in close when we're getting coverage. I'm like, okay, no problem. So, and back then I was literally just using, I didn't really know a whole lot about laving. I was just relying on boom and stuff like that. So this was like back in 2016. And then I just kind of grew over time as somebody that can do that. And, now, like you said, I worked on your film, and, you complimented my work. And, I still think that there's a lot of things that I'm learning and can change. Like, my mic selection for yours was good, but I have a couple of different shotgun mics that I like to use. And some of them lend themselves into different situations. Like, for example, if I'm inside, I'll use my Rode because it's a fairly flat mic. As far as the response goes, right, but it'll capture a little bit more warmth. And my Sennheiser is pretty cold. And I say that, I mean, it captures a lot of high end, right? So like when I say something's warm, it's a lot of low end. And when I say it's cold, it's like clinical. It's like capturing a high end, right? It's like the difference between looking at like old school video and film, right? Film usually seems very warm and colorized and you know what I mean? But you can make film look cold.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? But video tends to be more clinical, or I'm talking back in the early days of video. Video usually tended to be more cold and clinical and more accurate, right? Whereas film was more artistic and it had a feeling, right? It's like the difference between, in the audio world, it's like the difference between listening to a tape and listening to a CD. CDs are clinical and accurate. Tapes were like hissy, and they had this environment to them, right? They had this noise level that was just inherently there in the tape, right?
I discovered something interesting when I visited the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville a while back, and they had this station where you could listen to a recording of one of his songs in every single format that it exists in. So right from the original wax vinyl recording to I don't know, whatever grade of vinyl came after that. There's, several different formats.
So it was like 70 second, and then there was the 33s, and then there was 8-track. So you could sample each one, right? And you could go to 8-track and then tape and then CD and then digital. Like, it was all the different bits of evolution of music, of sound recording. And something that I learned from that was that, by and large, it never really kind of dawned on me before, but the best, cleanest, but albeit I would say most sterile sound was digital. Right? Was it like a FLAC file that you were listening to?
I'm not sure.
Because MP3 is actually really low quality. So like if you're listening to like a high quality audio file, you're either listening to a WAV file or you're listening to a FLAC file. Right. Waves are huge.
Possibly. A good possibility. But then what really sounded the most crisp, and I would say organic, was vinyl. And by and large,
absolutely,
across the board, the worst sound quality always came from tape. Because there was always that hiss.
Because there's a high noise floor.
Yeah, really, eh? Okay. So.
It's the noise floor. So tape inherently has a higher noise floor. And that changed over time, right? Like, so like if I don't know if you remember back in the day, we had, you were working with SVHS. So like I started working in SVHS, and then I moved my way up to Betamax, which was like a higher quality. It's a different format of tape. Right? Completely different resolutions and stuff like that. Yep. But like, if you take a look at the quality of tape, right? That as it kind of went from, beta to Betamax to Digibeta to mini DV to HDV, right? The technology really was the same, but it was just finer and finer granules of like the particles that were there, right? Yeah. And there's always going to be that inherent noise floor with tape. but that's also a sound in itself, right? You kind of, you can add it to a digital file, you know, but you can never take it away from a tape. And if you, depending on what sound you're looking for, like, here's the thing, if you're trying to replicate like a VHS style thing, you know, like, you're going to have tracking issues. You're going to have inherent high noise floors. You're going to have, you know, the graininess of it. Even though tape was a relatively clean format, you still had all that, right? It was never as clean as, like, I'm talking beta. SVHS and VHS were garbage formats. They were basically, they came around because Sony didn't want to sell the rights to beta to anybody else. So JVC's like, well, we have this other 1-inch format, so we'll do this. Like, I won't get into the history of it, but basically Sony screwed up. So they stayed at the professional level, and then JVC and all the other companies that bought into this VHS format basically kind of took over. Even though it was a garbage format, it had half the resolution, half the information, you know, it was way cheaper to do, and they could get the rights to produce them. Whereas Sony was like, no, we're specifically selling beta, which is why it never did it good in the consumer market. It did really well in the professional market. So like if you walked into a television station in, you know, the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, or early 2000s, you saw everything was beta and all the tapes looked the same. You know, it wasn't until tapes were phased out that I stopped seeing beta in you know, professional situations. Now it's just drive recorders. Sorry, that was a huge rant.
Oh yeah,
but,
no,
you
it's
know,
all good. It makes me want to say, like, you know, if you look at Sony's decision making now, and then if you compare it to their movie decision making today, it would seem they, you know, seem to have a bit of, it's like history's repeating itself. They seem to be.
Oh, they still haven't learned their lesson because they, I mean, look at the PlayStation, right? You know, they're like, Xbox is like buying up all of these markets and stuff like that, and Sony's like, no, we're producing games for our system and our system only, right? So, you know, I'm a big PlayStation fan myself. Like, I mean, when it comes to, like, I mean, just I'm sorry, this conversation's over. Oh, geez, if I turn my camera around, you will see the wall of Xbox that I have. Oh, really? I'm a PC Master Race guy that went down to Xbox because of I work on a PC and I don't want to have games on my PC, so I didn't want to like have the risk of me like wasting my time on games. So like when I sit down on my TV, that's game time. When I sit down on my computer, that's work time. Right. Oh, I hear you. I'm trying to make that division myself, and it's become don't have games on your DAW or your edit suite because you will waste time. And I mean, a lot of people make that mistake because a lot of edit suites nowadays are gaming machines. Right. Exactly. It's not until you reach the prosumer and commercial market that you have dedicated workstations. I think the best edit suite I ever worked on was a $50,000 HP dual Xeon workstation. Wow. It couldn't play games at all. But I mean, I could record through Avid, through its device control, from tape or whatever device, record, digitize onto the system, and task out, go into Adobe After Effects, work on titling, render it while it's still recording to Avid at the same time on this system. And then my renders were like insanely fast. Wow. The technology has changed so much. You know, you no longer need that $50,000 edit suite. It's still nice to have, but you know, it's the studio I'm learning in right now. Their workstations are all Mac. They're just a little cube, and they're Pro Tools rigs. That's it. That's all there is to it. It's no longer you have this big honking workstation with rack mount, everything under the sun. You know, you don't need it anymore. Wow, man, we've talked about a lot of different things. Holy smokes! You know? Wow. You think I'd learn, you know, maybe I should just be like, okay, well, you know what, maybe I'll just hang my hat. I've tried hanging my hat. Here's the thing. Don't hang when it comes to passion and stuff like that. I have tried to hang my hat 2 times. I closed my business down in 2013. I took a break. You know what I did with that? I ran paintball teams. And then when I wasn't doing that, I got into Warhammer. And you know what I did with Warhammer? I started a YouTube channel. I always come back to it. It's funny. I mean, I owned a studio in Smiths Falls running a YouTube channel and a business out of it. Right? It's insane. And then like I took a 3-year hiatus because I had some family stuff that I had to deal with. And now I'm back. You know, I've reacquired a lot of the equipment I used to have. I've got more stuff now. I'm running a Sony camera, which, by the way, they're the shit.
Nice.
You know, so for both my still photography and videography, I run a Sony, and then I have like all of my audio gear. It's got like a bunch of like mics specific for video production, you know, so a couple lavs and some stuff like that. I'm working on my musical selection of microphones as we speak, you know, but I'm not doing a whole lot of that yet. I'm working on that aspect, because my dream one day, if I could do it, would be to have a space that I could either rent or own, that I could have a band or some talent come in and just play a set. And they come in, they play a set, I mic them up, and then I stream the whole thing with multiple cameras, you know, get some jib arms in there and stuff like that. If you would to say, take a look at there's a band called Ginger. They're a metal band, and then the vocalist is absolutely amazing. It's a video produced called Pisces. If you look it up on YouTube, if I could have a dream right now and I had no limit on what kind of money I could spend, right? I want to produce stuff like that on a regular basis for any band that decides to walk into my studio. I want to be able to go in, have a live setup that they can just multi-camera stream. I can set it up so that it just outputs to a switching station, and I've got multiple cameras, either PTZ or manned, right? Preferably at least one man, because you need that aspect. You need to go in and get those nitty gritty shots, right? Because you get your standard drum kit shot from overhead, and the drummer's just like, right? You've got a couple other shots you can get from there, right? And then you've got your low angle guitar shots. But being able to have a band come in and produce a show on the regular, right, to showcase talent and stuff like that, that's, to me, if I had no limit on whatever money I could spend, I would love that. And to do that, I need to be both an expert in the video that I'm producing, the streaming that I'm using, and the sound. It's a hard thing to do, and not everybody can do it. It's kind of why I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. But if I can do that, that would be a happy place. That would be a happy place for me, because I used to do that with like tapes and stuff like that, but I could never stream it. I've streamed it like 2 or 3 times, right? But I'd love to be able to do that on the regular for people around here for like, you know, $1,000. They come in, they play a set, right? And then they get this set produced, and they're playing. They can send it off to people to showcase how they play, you know, and stuff like that. And then you've got the artisticness of the lighting and the sound in the room, right? Like just cater that room towards like a live jam space, and then have the ability to, you know, output it to the world, right?
Make it a goal, man. Make it.
It is a goal. That's why I'm taking audio recording and engineering, because like that's the last step for me, because, you know, I know how to set up a band live, but I want to be able to make it sound gold. I want to be able to make it sound like, okay, because like it's essentially what it is an off the floor live tracking session. I have one video, 2 videos I did with a band. And this is what was the aha moment for me. And this is from a few years back. It was insanely stressful, but in a good way. And I was tasked with recording, and I'll end on this note. I was tasked with recording a band. They were a Beatles cover band. Okay. And they were playing 2 songs, All the Lonely People and Eleanor Rigby. And I had a Tascam recorder, which I'm okay with. I had a Tascam recorder, 4-channel Tascam recorder, and I had 4 mics. I had 2 Sennheiser SM57s and 2 Sennheiser SM58s. And I also had the ability to output directly from the amp that the singer that was using. So I set it up so that I had a stereo mix of all of the violins and violas and stuff like that they were playing. And then I had a mic on the bassist. He was also, he was running out of the amp, right? And so I had a mic on the amp, and then I had the camera audio, and then I had the vocalist was literally just running a direct interface or DI out of their amp into the recorder so I could get that track. So I set all my levels flat, right? Because as a video guy, you're trained to set everything at a certain level. I'm not trained to mix. I'm trained to set them flat and get good, clean audio. So that was my objective, right? So I cut the video together for them, and they're like, oh man, it sounds really clinical. It sounds good, but it's missing something. And the guy asked me, he's like, hey, I'm an engineer. Do you mind if I take your audio and like mix it a little bit? And I'm like, yes, on one condition. He's like, what's that? I'm like, you show me somehow exactly what you did.
Okay,
or
yeah.
tell me exactly what you
That's
did. And then he recorded a screen capture of what he did while he was working with the audio.
Yeah.
And
The rest, as they say, is history.
the rest, they say, is history. Are two of my favorite videos I ever did, right? It was just a static camera shot of this band playing, right? But if I could take that and expand it into like using OBS or other software to like multi-camera stream it at 4K or just live to drive it and then just have a video that could go up later.
Yeah. Nothing's
right?
impossible,
And
man.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. So I got this baby right here. I mean, it's an old board, but it sounds good. It's got direct outs from every single channel, right? So like I'm already trying to set myself up to be able to do these things.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the gear. I mean,
working on it. So I need to. I could technically do it right now, right? Because I can get the cameras and I can go rent cameras and I can go rent it. It's just a matter of having a band that's willing to pay. But I think if I can have the setup that I own and I could be like, yes, a service I offer is multi-camera streaming. So I could offer multi-camera streaming for conferences and stuff like that, but also offer it for bands and then be able to go in and set up and do like a multi-camera shoot. Whether it's 2 or 3 cameras, it doesn't matter. Just kind of be able to switch every 5 seconds, keep people entertained. They're there for the music anyway. So as long as the music sounds good, people are going to watch it. Right? Because as long as it sounds good, people are going to watch it. There is nothing more awful in a film. And this is the thing. This is coming from somebody who loves audio and knows audio. Yeah. There's nothing that pisses me off or anybody else that watches a movie off anymore than bad audio. Yeah. And audio is like 50 to 60% of your production. Your shots can look amazing, but if they sound garbage, your film's garbage. It doesn't matter how it looks. It's the sound, right? Because if it's uncomfortable for people to hear, if it's uncomfortable for, if it doesn't sound natural, if it doesn't sound like it makes sense, your body is going to naturally reject it because your sound, as humans, our eyes are garbage in the animal world, right? Like our vision is not great. You could see something that looks good and picturesque and be like, oh man, that's a beautiful picture, but it sounds awful. If there's like a mosquito buzzing in your ear the whole time, you're going to be like, oh God, I want to get out of here.
Yeah, that's the thing. The ears are always on, but the eyes aren't, right? I mean, the eyes aren't, you look down at your popcorn in the movie theater, you blink, you doze off if the movie's boring, whatever. There, visually, there's a lot of things that you could potentially miss when you're watching a movie or anything, any kind of production. But your ears are always on, and you're going to hear everything. And if there's, mistakes visually, you can be more forgiving for. But audio, I mean, that stands out way more than I think a lot of people would admit to.
So I can't speak 100%, but I'll use a prime example because I have a trained ear. I think I like to think I have a trained ear and I have a very trained eye for film. Like I will pick things out like there's no tomorrow. I can dissect a film pretty good. There are more times that I have stopped watching a film, and these are like, AAA films, B films and stuff like that because of bad audio or bad story.
Oh yeah.
Than I can count on my hands because I will ignore bad shots more than I can ignore bad story or bad sound. Bad sound is like the big thing that'll just be like, okay, this film is garbage. I'm, like whoever was doing this clearly wasn't paying attention. Like I can remember one film, it was a multi-budget, $1 million budget film, such an awesome film. Yeah. The person gets into a car and they ruffle papers.
Yeah.
And they must have done it ADR, but it sounded so unnatural that I was like, cool, I can't watch this anymore. Click. And I never watched the rest of it.
I saw a movie over the weekend that I think would probably make your skin crawl when it came to the audio. The story was awful too, but like I was watching this and I was like, they get to fire everybody. They get to fire the writer. They get to fire the cinematographer. They get to fire the sound designer. Like, oh my God, it was awful on so many levels. And Michael Madsen was in it. But we really should wrap things up. Dude, you are a wellspring of information. I love the idea of doing another podcast, another episode with you. This is what we're here for, right? We're here to I'll get to know the creative people of Eastern Ontario and their passions and connect them. So, if there are any bands out there looking to have their have a set turned into a video, let me know.
Live off the floor. That's the thing. Live off the floor key. Because live music is so much better than pre-recorded. And
if there's anybody listening who is a passionate filmmaker, videographer, what have you, in the area, throw your hat in the ring. And who knows what may end up happening out of all these things. Another note that I'll touch on, we talked a lot about editing, which I would just I love it. I have such a passion for editing myself. Anybody else out there who is a passionate editor, I would highly recommend a film called The Conversations by Michael Laudontier. It is basically a biography of the very talented, infamous film editor Walter Murch. If you're editing enthusiast and you don't know who Walter Murch is, shame on you. No, but yeah, get to know. If you don't know who it is, I highly, highly recommend getting to know who Walter Murch is. And once again, that's The Conversations by Michael Laudontier. And read that. It is you will learn just from his experiences in what made me think of it was when you were talking about using sound to evoke emotion.
It's so important.
There's so much in Walter Murch's story when he's talking about the process of editing and the techniques that he used, and it makes you think like, oh my God, it becomes the techniques that he uses are so good that he talks about that, like when you're watching a movie and he refers back to what he did here and there, it's like you didn't even notice it. It was subliminal. It just flowed along. You totally didn't get what he was doing there. But what they accomplished was added to the visual and the story, and so much with the brilliant use of sound cues and music and etc. And it just goes to show like how much goes into this and how much of a multifaceted art it is. To end off, Ken, for somebody like yourself who is really enjoying this episode, and I know you say that and I wholeheartedly agree that you have a talent for the visual, and that's where your passion is. But I wouldn't sell short your passion and talent for the audio as well. What would you recommend to somebody who did want to become a audio guru? Where would they start? What would you want? How should they start on that path?
It depends on what you're talking about. If it's as far as music goes, I would start by learning. If you're getting into recording anything, I would start by learning a bit about how sound works, because from there you get into, how mics pick up sound and what mics to use where. Like everything I use is, I understand how the mics work and stuff like that. There is actually a wonderful book I have. I bought this. It was like $80. So like as far as film goes, this is probably one of the best books I've ever read on sound production in film. It's called Behind the Sound Cart.
Behind the Sound Cart.
Yeah, I just bought it, and it goes through film from a sound perspective. Like you see the shotgun mics in there, so it's pretty detailed, and it starts off with the boring, like what's a mixer do, what's the director do, and stuff like that, and then it goes really in depth into sound production and stuff like that, both on and off camera, and
who's the author on that?
Goes to sound techniques. It's Petrushka Mirzwa. So it's Behind the Sound Card, a veteran's guide to sound on set.
Okay.
It was $80, but it's worth it. And if you want to get into sound for film, this is a huge thing. If you want to get into sound for music, honestly, if you know any bands that are looking for recordings to be done, I would suggest you look into two mics to learn, just to learn multi-tracking. Get a recorder of some kind. Doesn't have to be spectacular quality because you're just learning. And get a SM58, so a Shure SM58, which is used for vocals. It's an omnidirectional mic. It records from all around the microphone. And then Shure SM57 used for instruments, which records in a cardioid pattern, which means it looks like a heart. So once you can get something like that going, you can kind of play with your microphones and learn, because it's all about developing an ear for sound, and developing the knowledge of where to put the mics, where you want to go to get what sound, right? And the same principles that you used for recording music kind of hold true. They hold true for film as well, even though you're using different mics. Like I use the cardioid mics. The mics that I use for film is a boom mic, which is a cardioid mic. It's a super cardioid mic, so it records in a heart shape, but it's very, very focused. And then my lav mics, which are usually omnidirectional, but they still primarily get a lot more sound from the top, right? And then from there you'll learn how to hide a lav. You'll learn how to do all that kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of tools you can buy. There's all kinds of money you can dump in it. But like if you can get like a Zoom recorder or a Tascam recorder that records with 2 to 4 channels, and just start playing around with your microphones. The key thing is you have to practice. You have to play. And that's holds true with anything. Holds true with cameras, holds true with photography. One thing that I would stress for people to learn the art of is play. Because you're going to spend more time playing with your equipment and learning your equipment and practicing with your equipment and getting a feel for how it works off field than on field. The worst thing you can do when you're on a professional set or in a situation where you're being paid is to make a mistake because you just simply don't know how your equipment's supposed to behave in a given situation. And then from there, you'll learn how to troubleshoot your equipment too, because chances are if you're playing with it, stuff's going to come up. Like I have had instances where, I pressed a button on a microphone and I'm like, okay, why am I not getting signal now? And it was something as simple as, I have to change this button because it's no longer sending signal out to this one. It's sending it out to this one, right? Like it's just stuff like that. You never, and now I know, like, it's okay. This is the problem. Click. Yeah. It's play. Yeah. Play and learn. Never stop learning.
Become, keep at it and become proficient.
That was a 15-minute rant for a single sentence answer.
That's all good, man. Yeah, we've got lots of gold here, dude. You asked me earlier. It's like, hope we got some gold. Like we got bullions.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. We got an hour and a half of bullions.
Well, I need to make you work for this, right?
Hey. I really hope that everybody listening found this interesting and got a wealth of information. I know I found it fascinating, and it was a genuine pleasure to nerd out here with Ken on audio and editing and filmmaking and all that sort of thing. So, did find it interesting. Please subscribe so you can stay up to date as to when new episodes are coming out. There'll be a new episode every Monday. Like, subscribe, give us a nice rating on Spotify and all that fun stuff. So yeah, we'll wrap up here. Thank you so much, Ken, for
you're welcome.
Part of this. And who knows, one day maybe the 613 region will be known as, the place to go to be a filmmaker. So
We do have some big projects coming here next year. I do know that.
Yeah, really.
Oh yeah, I've heard through the grapevine. Going to be some big stuff.
Well, it's like I said in my initial promo for the podcast. Yeah, okay. Like, I mean, people tell you like you want to get into film, like go to Toronto, go to Vancouver, and there's lots of merit to that. But I don't see any reason why the Eastern Ontario can't be included on that list, because there is so much talent here, and there's so much, as you say, so many big things coming and being done. And it'd be great. People were made aware of that. If we could do our part here at 6-3 Creatives in bolstering the Eastern Ontario as a creative destination, then yeah, we've done our job. So yeah, just love to connect people, and I'm loving this idea of connecting all of the great filmmaking talent that I've so far had the privilege of being able to work with and create some awesome stuff with. So thanks again, Ken.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So yeah, people, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.